1100 plus islands with a total land area of less than 278 square kilometers. But Maldives lies strategically at the junction of Eastern Indian Ocean and Western Indian Ocean, and it lies at the junction where 50% of India's trade and 80% of its energy import come via this route. So that makes Maldives more important. And nowadays, especially when when Pakistan tried to establish some terrorist camps in the northern islands of northern atolls of island, with the help of some Saudi terrorists. And now that China has been trying in Abdullah Yamin since Abdullah Yamin's time to exert greater influence on Maldives by way of giving training in various sectors, by way of developing the Hulule International Airport, have a road bridge from capital Male to Hulule, which is about 8 miles. So China had done its bit, and Abdullah Yamin was very much in Chinese lap. Now, with defeat of Solih and with victory of Muizzu, who is again from the same party, People's Progressive Party of Maldives, which Yamin founded. Now, this should ring a warning bell for India, because while Solih was overtly pro-India, Muizzu is not, and Muizzu has already told in his election manifesto that if he gets elected, then he will ask Indian armed forces to leave Maldives. By armed forces, he meant the Indian army, the contingent of Indian army, which gives training as well as few helicopters for training. So Maldives is now under Muizzu, Maldives will certainly drift towards China, which will have to have a Herculean task in getting back to our fold, or getting back to the pro-Indian. So this is going to be a challenging thing, I suppose.
It's going to be a challenging situation. Let me, in fact, get in Robin Sachdev, foreign affairs expert, into the discussion. Mr. Sachdev, how do you see the situation in Maldives? Because when you're talking about the China factor, let us know wherever China has intervened in an economy, it has, in fact, broken the back of that economy. We're talking about Sri Lanka, we're talking about China, and now experts say that Maldives, which is technically having almost 70% of its external debt owed to China, could be the next waiting Sri Lanka that is going to happen. So, what are we looking at? Will Muizzu actually do a Rajapaksa to Maldives?
Thank you so much. A pleasure, honor to be with you and General Minister and Ambassador Tripathi. I mean, in a big picture, if I were to step back, in our neighborhood, the countries which are there, we often see this pattern. One government in power, let's say pro-India, maybe for 1 term, 2 term, that party loses. The next government which comes, then, if not exactly anti-India, they lean more towards China. We are seeing it in all our neighborhood. Sri Lanka, Bangladesh would be there also, Nepal also, right? Maldives. Forget Pakistan, that's perennial in another camp. So I would see Maldives in that pattern, like for some years with India and some years away from India. But in the case of Maldives, I think it's gotten more severe. Because this Solih, the last 5 years, yeah, sure, he was more pro-India, but the previous one, Yamin, was totally with China, and that's when they built up these, various infrastructure projects. And now this guy back, and very overtly, very clearly, saying that they want to work more with China. Though, so that would definitely, and is a matter of concern, as Ambassador Tripathi has said. Now, China investing via or through or in the mechanism of the Belt Road Initiative, definitely many countries have fallen into that trap, including Sri Lanka, and some others are out there. However, now it may be so that because of more awareness of the Chinese, debt policies, the countries which do take on the BRI projects would get slightly better terms than in the past. I think that's a hunch of mine. And even China itself is seeing that, there's a blowback to the way it was purely extracting, its pound of flesh via the BRI projects. But yes, the BRI projects would go ahead, the infrastructure projects and whichever ones they may further, imagine or create with Maldives. And that embeds China deeper and deeper into Maldives, without a doubt. Though it's understood also that Maldives, it's not that Maldives will totally shut out India. Of course, they are talking about, some of our army folks out there to be sent back to India. But Maldives realizes that its closest neighbor, big neighbor, is India, right? So it's not that India's influence will go down. Yeah, it will go down somewhat. But it's more that China's influence, which was lower or lesser, will grow in Maldives.
Well, Chinese influence growing in Maldives. Let me get in Major General Sanjay Mason into the discussion. Major General, how do you see the Chinese influence growing in Maldives? We have boots on the ground and probably they will be asked to move out. But, from technically being what we would like to say a country that has been protected by India's security umbrella, moving into the Chinese camp, it could create a lot of havoc, isn't it? You have major powers in the Indian Ocean region, because the Indian Ocean region now becoming the only most important trading route that is there, because the way it is strategically situated, one of the biggest shipping lanes, and India having a strategic presence in Maldives is very important. But then local conditions could be very tough. This election and the previous election also was fought on India's presence in Maldives. So how do you in fact think that we would be able to win the kind of lost public support in Maldives, and how strategically important is to have boots on the ground in Maldives?
Yeah, I think you have raised 3-4 issues. The first is you have raised about China. How does it impact us? See, let's be very clear. After the Russia-Ukraine war, there have been large number of fallouts in this world. After the Russian invasion, what has happened today in, between Azerbaijan and Armenia in the Nagorno-Karabakh area, we have seen that they have gone unhindered, the Azerbaijan forces, and they have practically displaced the entire Armenian population from there, and they have annexed it. So what is the implication coming on to? Implication is that today's world, with the Russian, whatever they have done, and you look even today in African countries, military coups and all are taking place, and things are going very, very different. So my fear is that China is today now going to take advantage of this geopolitical scenario. Therefore, what is the best lucrative target? It has got 3 concerns. The biggest concern it is obviously in Taiwan in the Indo-Pacific. Second concern is the borders between India and China. And the third concern is the competition between India, China, and also between India and America. Now, let us address the concerns, their Indo and Chinese so-called competition. Now, this same competition is also going to take place in the Indian Ocean, especially in the area of Maldives. And that is how this will assume importance. And rightfully brought out by the earlier panelists, this area, or rather Maldives now, is going to become a competition between India and between China. Now, who can have better influence? Time will dictate, but as on date, India's influence has been much better. See, let us understand the concerns of Maldives. Maldives has got some few concerns. Firstly, it has got a huge EEZ. How does it maintain it? Obviously, the first responders is India. We are the closest. Geographically, we are the closest. Climatically, and today there are predictions, but that by 2050, about 80% of Maldives will be submerged. Where will these people go to? These are all a lot of implications. Once the islands are getting submerged, a lot of these people will go to the nearest island, maybe Sri Lanka, and maybe they start coming to India. So this is going to be a big, big concern for both, for India and also for Maldives. Now for Maldives, if these are the concerns, who's going to be the first responder? Ambassador Tripathi also brought out when he was there. 1988, the Indian Army actually assisted there in terms of Operation Cactus, and we are aware what was happening there. Politically, we stabilized that nation. So what I'm trying to say is we are the first and foremost immediate responders. So therefore, let's be very clear, they require us. Maldives require us. Now, they will play a game between China and Maldives. Tomorrow, if India does not toe their line in certain issue, they will go to China, the way Sri Lanka has done. And not only that, they will also now start going to Pakistan, because during Yameen's time, there was a lot of radicalization happening. Radicalization is also going to be expected. See, the PPM, this party which has just won the elections, the other party, they were generally fairly liberal. Now, this is more of a authoritative kind of a rule which is going to set in. So, all these points out that Pakistan will exploit it, China will exploit it, so radicalization is expected. So, these are major, major issues. So, what are the strategic concerns to India? Number one, I would say the string of pearls policy which China is advocating. So, therefore, in this race between India and China in Maldives, now our diplomacy has to be of the highest order, our political will has to be of the highest order. We will have to be really making inroads into Maldives despite the present dispensation now Muizzu is taking over. So that's a reality. The next concern is we have 25,000 Indians settled down over there. They are expats. So tomorrow, with the kind of radicalization happening, there is chances that they can be taken hostage. Any possibility, any scenario is possible. The way Islamic fundamentalism is going on, and probably that is also one of the likelihood. And the third thing is that the radicalization I've already mentioned. Yeah, radicalization is very, very important, which is now going to impact. So all these are security concerns, and in 2021, I have read it from the open sources that there is a place known as Uthru Tila Falu Island, which is very close to Malé, that is the capital. And there India has signed a treaty in 2021 to make a port, which is to be having a dockyard and also harbor. Now it will be jointly run, and obviously it has got military connotations, and we have some people there deployed on ground. Now, will this be allowed to flourish with the new government? That's also a question mark. The Chinese will not be interested that we have it. So it's going to be a very critical situation for India. China will definitely try to exploit this situation. And therefore, today we politically, diplomatically, and in every manner, we have to be very, very proactive here in Maldives, because it has got long-term security implications. And last but not the least, how many islands are there? I think about 1,200 islands. How many are occupied? Only 200. 1,000 islands are uninhabited. Tomorrow, anyone can go and sit down in these islands. Let us not forget Myanmar. We have the Coco Islands there of Myanmar, which has been leased to China. They have a listening post there. So China's string of pearls policy gives a lot of advantages to China. There are and for India also. That is why we are going for all these drones, etc. Long range ones, the high altitude, long endurance, drones. This is the reason we are going, so that all these uninhabited islands, we can keep a track about it. Radical elements, Chinese elements can operate there, and therefore we have to be very active in terms of security, in terms of diplomacy, and I've highlighted these concerns.
Well, Ambassador J.K. Tripathi, one question that I have is that why is it that in the last almost 2-3 elections in Maldives, the question is about being pro-India and anti-India? Why has it come to the ballot box? Who is whipping up these anti-India sentiments in Maldives?
Well, this has been started by China clandestinely sometime in 2008. And China found this anti-India sentiment And it was at its peak when uh, we were ousted from the development of Honolulu Airport by GMR, and then China grabbed the opportunity. Now, one or two things I would like to clarify as per my experience as regards fundamentalism and radicalism and its rise in Maldives. We don't have to worry much about that because during the last 50 years, only one or two cases of fundamentalism happened when some Saudi trained jihadists were located in the remote northern island of Maldives. So basically, by culture, the Maldivians are quite close to Mumbai, I will say. Their language is a combination of Malayalam, Sanskrit, and Arabic with a different and distinct script. I remember when I mean any fashion which originated in Mumbai was to be seen in Malé the very next morning. So that is the sort of their inclination towards India. But recently, I mean 2 months back, there was a survey which revealed that 63% of the people are more Chinese than the rest 37% of more pro Indians.
So
It is
where
not
are we
that they
losing
are.
influence? Why are we losing influence, and where are we losing that influence?
Pardon?
Why are we losing that influence, and where are we losing that influence?
No, China is using the influence to one to give indiscreet loans. And as you know, China, as you yourself have said, that Maldives is in the verge of becoming next Sri Lanka if it is not if matters are not solved very carefully, because China has given enormous loans, and that Chinese policy is once you give the loans, then then you finalize the terms and conditions, and then you are in a dictating position. And China wants, because as General Minister said, Coco Islands, Sri Lanka, Hambantota, and now they would like to have Maldives, so that they would like to encircle India with a string of pearls, what they say. So this has become a problem, but I think one biggest thing uh, for the government of India to do is to have more development projects, more line of credit on more liberal terms, and I mean, project grants. And as I must inform that India has established a big 500 bed hospital. India has established a Maldivian Institute of Technical Education. India has given 800 million of US dollars in soft LOC in 2019 and 100 million of US dollars is grant for other projects. But I think, though might be somebody might question that Maldives is such a tiny country. Why are they pumping so much of money? But strategically, it is important that we develop Maldives. And I'm happy to see that when I was there was no double-story buildings, but now there are multi-story buildings, and the capital has expanded. So my idea is that government should pay more attention on Maldives on a regular basis, because this problem is this checkmate will be continued to be played on Maldives by China. So we have to be careful, and we have to convince them, and I think we have convinced the Maldivians up to a great extent that we are there for their benefit, for developing together, sabka saath, sabka vishwas type of thing, so that they don't they can see the farce, they can see through the Chinese plan of action.
Well, but Robinder, Sachdev, one thing that I've seen from all the arguments is that somewhere we are losing influence, somewhere the Chinese have gained, somewhere they are even going to the process of trying to oust India from Maldives. We had a relationship, and I think we just kept thinking that it's not going to change, because when Yamin came in, it was a total change of what Maldives used to be. He has, in a way, radicalized it. He's spoken about how India is having overt influence, and yet, as Tripathi was saying, we in fact can see how there is a change in the local mood of that country. The population there seems to be becoming more pro-Chinese, and this is after examples of how Nepal is in a debt trap. We have Sri Lanka in a debt trap. We have other nations which are quite in a debt trap, and yet favorable opinion of China. So somewhere something is going wrong when it comes to our investments in Maldives. It doesn't seem to be having that kind of ability to influence when it comes to the local population. Where are we going wrong? We are also investing in, we have given them almost 2 billion in terms of loans and grants and credit lines is what we have given in the last few years, but it is not yielding the kind of results that the Chinese are in fact able to get.
Thank you. Great question. I think one reason could be that perhaps more or most of our loans and such investments in Maldives have been more perhaps in the social sectors, right? Like even if a hospital, yeah, it helps the people. It should bring us a lot of goodwill, right? Education and all. Whereas what the Chinese do is that, they are putting in their monies more into infrastructure projects. And when they put monies into the infrastructure projects, that gives the politician perhaps more leeway to claim to his constituencies that, look here, I've got this huge project, this road being built, this rail track being built, this port being built, etc. And of course, yeah, those also generate local jobs and opportunities. So that could be one reason why, Chinese loans are having more impact. Of course, and plus also the numbers. I think whatever be our total number that we've put into Maldives would be, I don't have those numbers, by the way, and neither do I have exact Chinese, but I would estimate that the Chinese numbers would be more than ours, right? And politicians, they want to get elected or re-elected, and announcing such schemes gets them some brownie points. So the politicians start favoring the Chinese, and of course there is corruption in it. The politician gets some kickbacks also, which he or she then also can share with their own, within their own circles, etc. So the Chinese loans, I think, have those dimensions which appeal to, dictatorial or authoritarian regimes who want to stay on in power and show some mega projects to their publics as to what they're doing. That's one. Secondly, what I see is, Maldives could be a very ideal laboratory for China. Because you see, one hand, Yamin's term previously was quite authoritarian, right? So even now, I mean, if not much authoritarian, but definitely some of those aspects would be there. So for China, the ideal is to not only have a string of pearls, but also to promote the Xi Jinping thought, so to say, right? So can or will China promote that political thought also in a country like Maldives? It's a small enough country. Fairly authoritarian leader out there. So some of the policies overall, as which China would want to export would also be there. Thirdly, yes, as pointed out earlier, there's if not a great power game, definitely there's a huge game going on in this whole Indo-Pacific region. You remember the Pacific Islands with whom we had Prime Minister Modi, we had an India-Pacific Islands Forum. 14 of them came together. President Biden, a few days ago or a week or two ago, hosted a summit with these same group of countries. Okay, and I think, by the way, Solomon Islands president did not go to that meeting, if I'm not mistaken. Right. So America is going these, atolls and archipelagos wherever they are. China is going, we are going. America, from a naval strategy perspective, what they've also decided is that in addition to their, heavy, dense bases like Okinawa, a base in Australia, base in Korea, 5 or 4 bases in Philippines, America is now going after a more distributed strategy, wherein they're trying to locate, islands, such islands where they can, station mobile units of marines and anti-missile and radar and tracking everything else. Because if there were to be a war, it would be that how do you, span or cover all of these bases? So similarly, like here in Maldives with so many islands, yeah, there is. I mean, easily one of these islands could be leased out to China for some electronic listening posts and all, or could be taken up by China as exclusive even.
Well, in fact, we will get back to Robin Sachdev once that connection is in fact restored. Let me go to, in fact, Major General Sanjay Mason. Major General, the Chinese have had an expansionist view of its naval presence. It's been trying to promote its naval presence in the Indian Ocean as well. We have seen how they sneakingly come with their, their ship that is said to be a huge listening post that keeps coming into the Indian Ocean and moves. Its oceanographic studies have also been concerned with spying, and the Chinese want somewhere a base for their naval presence. You have the Diego Garcia also in the Indian Ocean, you have Mauritius, you have Maldives, all of them have Western naval presences as well. Is the Indian Ocean becoming too crowded, and is it becoming a huge fight between big powers to establish their presence in the Indian Ocean?
Yeah, very true. Oceans now are becoming of great strategic significance, and we can understand the way you have also highlighted, right out to Horn of Africa, China, Djibouti. Chinese have made their inroads and they've got a base there, Hambantota, and I just mentioned about Myanmar, that listening post, Coco Islands, and similarly in this thing, Bangladesh, and Maldives, of course, now they'll be looking for some bases discreetly or maybe directly, because after the Russian-Ukraine conflict, things have now become a little different. They can go unhindered, and international community, UN can keep condemning, but people, if a nation decides, it can do anything. So all these things are going to happen. So therefore, Indian Ocean now today has become an area or a zone where there will be a lot of competition between so many countries. Similarly, the way India is doing, we are also going to Indo-Pacific. Our ships are crossing the Strait of Malacca and going that side. So oceans, actually, the advantages, ocean and skies, the advantages, especially in the sky, ocean, you have beyond the EEZ, anyone is free to operate. So therefore, whether you are spying and you can come in garb of, saying that you want to prevent smuggling or narco-terrorism or anything. So you have got unhindered movement. So therefore, whether it is Indo-Pacific or whether it is, we have seen even in the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, or whether it is in the Indo-Pacific, these areas now are going to be heavily contested or competed with the naval fleets and naval ships of all the nations. So this is going to happen, and we have to prepare that. You just highlighted in between is the Indian influence losing. I perhaps may not agree Indian influence is losing. Reason being, see, firstly, we are the first responders. Our geographical location is understandable, or is well understood by the local Maldivian. Number two, in the 2004 tsunami crisis and even in the COVID crisis, I think India was the first responder to help them by sending all these COVID vaccines and even in the tsunami. So therefore, the people of Maldives are very well aware that India is a nation. It's a soft power, also a hard power when required. But we will be definitely helping and assisting in every possible manner. And therefore, any kind of aid is welcome. Next, the people also realize what has happened in Sri Lanka. You also highlighted. So whether, the Maldivian people will like to be in a debt crisis? No, they would not like to be. So therefore, they will play their cards very well. And I think what is going to happen in this Maldivian are going to play very smart. They are going to play the India card and China card both. In heart of the heart, the people of Maldives and even the political dispensation would be aware that India is strategically more important. But they will play the cards extremely well. Wherever they feel India is not responding, they will go to China. When China is responding, they will come to India. So they are going to play their cards extremely well, and I would say derive the best advantages from both the nations, the way Nepal is also doing. Despite being a Hindu nation, they are also playing their cards extremely well, taking a lot of advantage from China. So Maldives is perhaps going to play their card, and therefore it is going to be more of a race between China and between India here. But geographically, it has more advantage to us. Location, time-wise, we will be much better to respond until and unless tomorrow Chinese can convince them in such a manner that they have a naval base like the one they have in Djibouti. If they can do this, then it is a big, big concern to us. And I think India needs to be very, very proactive. I repeat, very proactive. Now we have to have more defense cooperation with them, more interaction between the navies, because in this interaction we'll also come to know what Chinese visits are happening. The another advantage is most of the hotels are perhaps being run by the Indians, like Taj Group of Hotels, etc. Now they are going to be very, very important because they are going to be our eyes and ears. 25,000 people, Indians who are there in the entire. So they will tell us, like this year only in January, I had been to Maldives, and I stayed in one of the places. I recollect I saw a lot of Russian small ships were there. In fact, these rich Russians who have now realized the importance of economic embargo, and they were there for ages. I was told by the hotel people that they stay in the yachts and they come to the hotel and they are having a nice time. So what it boils down to is most of the countries will try to take a lot of advantage here in some or the other manner, but strategically it is most important for India, and China is now going to play its counter strategic cards in this area, and therefore again I highlight that India needs to be proactive both diplomatically, politically. We have to have huge defense cooperation. We have to continue this base, the island which we are establishing as a harbor or a dockyard. We must continue despite the Chinese presence, and diplomatically I'm quite sure we will do fairly well. So people again seem to be divided. I would not say people are aligned to China, because see, linguistically, culturally, they are more aligned to us. So those advantages are there. China can keep trying anything, but China will have more rough time. For India, it will be little easier. But yes, with the present political dispensation, it will be a hard bargain. And I think we as a nation are capable of achieving that hard bargain. And perhaps we'll have to give in more to suit what Maldives wants. Otherwise, they have an option to go to China. So this is where I think this is going to happen. Maldives is going to exploit the better of their interest between the two nations.
Well, also, let me get in, Mr. Tripathi, into the discussion now. We see on one side we can have a military presence, but diplomacy is something of a game that happens based on the context of that time. India played its diplomatic cards quite well till now, but then as we see our neighborhoods keep changing and rotating between governments that favor China and that governments that keep coming in that favor us. But how long can we continue with this rotational system of a changing neighborhood every time it happens? It looks like, Nepal was traditionally within our influence. It seems to be slipping and coming back. Sri Lanka was within our influence. It slips and comes back. We have Maldives now creating that another issue about slipping and coming back. And the Prime Minister has always been speaking about neighborhood first. But then strategically, where do you think that the Indian diplomatic community is lacking when trying to assess these challenges that are coming our way?
First, your first question, how long can we go on doing this, getting and letting it slip? This can go on as long as China keeps on playing its cards. So there will be no respite in the near future or in the distant foreseeable future. The second thing is where we lack. I think we should not let our guards down. What we sometimes do is that when there is a government against us, seemingly pro-China, then we become super active. But when there is a government again pro-India, then we become a little complacent, thinking that okay, now there is a government in our favor, and we should not worry about that. While China keeps on working silently throughout the year, throughout the tenure of any government, irrespective of whether it is pro-China or anti-China. That we should probably that we should not stop. We should be proactive every time throughout tenure of any government, irrespective of whether it is pro-India or pro-China, because that will only take. And as regards the Maldivian population there, yes, they are very much pro-India, but the recent, as I said, the recent survey says that there are 62% who like China more than they like India. This is because China has invested more in infrastructure and publicized it by its propaganda machine. I am sure that whatever development China is doing, China is not employing in all those infrastructure. China is not employing the sizable number of Maldivians, because there are this tiny community of Maldivians. They don't have that much of expertise or skill as well. So China would be, as usual, bringing in the prison labor, and which will certainly, not now but after some time, which will certainly start hurting Maldivians when there is a lack of employment, when unemployment rises to the unmanageable proportions. So we should also, I think, um, find new projects, new scholarships. By the way, let me tell you that when I was there, there were no schools in Maldives after 10th. So Indian government started a scholarship program under ICCR to get them to the universities, but there were no 11th and 12th, so we started to bring them in Indian colleges, Indian schools for higher secondary education. But crux of the point is that we should always be vigilant and careful, and we should always try to find out what are the things that what are the issues where China can have one upmanship with us.
Well, Rabindra Sachdev is back with us. Rabindra Sachdev, you heard where, diplomatically we are looking at it, strategically we are looking at it. But when you come to these two gentlemen, the local politics, Mr. Solih as well as Muizzu, it looks like both of them in their domestic politics have made us a card, and we have discussed about it. But both of them seem to be dependent on us or on China. Are we too much depending on the local politics to actually yield something rather than the institutions of Maldives to actually yield favorably to us?
Thank you so much. Am I coming through now?
Yeah, you're coming through.
Okay, great. Yeah. See, bottom line, all leaders bow to their local opinions, right? Diplomacy can, of course, take things to a certain point, but beyond that, it is the leaders and institutions. And if I understand your point, is it becoming too individual centric in this particular case, right?
Yes. It has become because we are big,
yeah. It certainly is individual centric, or rather, it's actually, let's look at it this way, it is more party centric, right? Solely, okay, if Solely or not solely, if somebody from his party comes, they would have continued, or they will continue more or less the trend of that party. Now, Muizzu, who's come here now, is of the party which Yamin also was representing, right? The previous president up till 2018. And he was the one who said things going fast track towards China and BRI. Okay. Now, this Muizzu is from the same party. So, yes, individuals, but perhaps it's the party and the party opinions, I think, which shape. And actually, one could look at it in any country in the world, right? Where it is, like even in the US, for example, if I were to say, Republicans, Trump. Okay, yeah, sure, Trump is the factor, but Trump represents a certain portion of the party which believes in what Trump is saying, right? Or Trump is saying what he is saying because he thinks that that portion of the party likes me to say this. So similarly, it's individuals matter, no doubt. But at the same time, I think it's more their power base within their parties which influences their decisions. Another thing that which was being discussed about China and India and our tango back and forth. Yes, China keeps working consistently, and India, we work maybe, and then maybe for some time, as I think Ambassador Tripathi was saying, that when we have a India-friendly government in power, we kind of slacken up, we think and hope things will continue to improve, whereas after a certain period of time, things change. China perhaps looks at it this way: 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. So like if one term is a president who's more friendly to India, China thinks, okay, that's 1 step backward. Let me keep taking 2 steps. I'll step back 1. In the net, China gains.
So that is an interesting analogy where you say that China has its own strategy out there. I'll give the last word to Major General Mason. We have seen how India has been trying to, circumvent this. We are having our own port constructions. We have a port in Vizhinjam that also looks at the majority of the trade that would perhaps pass through it. We are trying to bypass Hambota. There have been talks about dredging, but then it did not work out. But then we are having trying to build ports with other countries as well that could circumvent the so-called Pearl strategy that China has been putting in place. Do you think we have a sound strategy when it comes to facing the Chinese in the Indian Ocean?
See, to say it is sound strategy is too difficult, because strategy can only be tested once something happens on ground. But yes, we as a nation are making a lot of efforts to have a sound strategy. No strategy can ever be termed as sound, because there would be a lot of strategies keep changing depending on so many issues. Elections in the local country, wherever it is happening, change in the government, anything can happen in any country. Even China, nothing is permanent. Tomorrow, Xi Jinping can be dislodged by the military. Anything is possible. So strategies will keep evolving, keep changing, keep getting modified. But yes, as of date, we are very clear that we have to have a counter strength of Pearl's policy, and we are doing fairly well. We have gone right up to Mongolia. We have also got some bases in Central Asian republics. Yes, some places we have had mistakes. I would say Afghanistan is one live case, because today China and Pakistan is making inroads there. Whatever it is, that's a very, very strategic country for us. It's now forgotten, and we have to think about it. Similarly, now, whether it is Seychelles or Mauritius, we are going further. So, with the lost a lot of these ASEAN nations, Philippines, or in fact, Pacific Island countries. So we are also smartly playing our cards. I would not say that we are being overtaken by China. No, it's a total competition between now powers, and the powers are India, China, and the Americans. They also have a lot of interest in this area, because the Pacific Ocean obviously is very, very close to the only separating thing between China and Russia and China is the Pacific Ocean. So the 3 major nations, they are going to be a very, very important players here, and it suits us that today even our foreign minister has just made a statement, that our friendship with America is right up to moon and so forth.
Right.
So what I am trying to highlight is that our strategy also means having some kind of strategic alliances, though India does not believe in alliances, but indirectly, Quad, it is not an alliance, but yes, it is some partnership. So these kind of partnerships we are having, the kind of partnership, strategic partnership we are having with the United States, whether it is in defense, whether it is in technology, whether it is in artificial intelligence, semiconductors. I think these are all. So 2 major players today are vying in this area against one, that is China. So we have I would say, to put it in that way, we have a strategic advantage with not an ally, with a partner, and we are also today doing everything to counter the string of pearls policy, and certain things cannot be made even public. So we are doing fairly well, and of course time will say how well we have done, because strategy can only be tested once some contingency comes up on ground. So we should not be too much worried. I feel we are playing our cards correctly, and our diplomacy, I have got good faith in our diplomacy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Thank you, gentlemen. In fact, that's all the time that we have for this show as we, in fact, see how Maldives could become a very important factor in India-China ties. And that Chinese checkers that is being played in Maldives, India seems to be up for that game as well. Well, this particular show was styled by Paul Moll. That is one thing aspect of it. Well, it's an end on this. And on the other side, stay tuned to News 9 as we bring in some of the news beyond the news on News 9.
China won't let us rest easy on our borders, but they will keep flooding our markets. What does Xi Jinping really want?
I think he wants the Indian market, no doubt about it.
It's really a matter of showing their dominance.
India's great Chinese conundrum.
Nobody can contain it. Not the United States, not China, not anybody else.
Frenemies. This and more. Streaming on the world's first news OTT, News 9 Plus. Download now.
He thought he could outlast us. And 1 year later, the evidence is right here in this room.
Who will blink first?
So far from preventing the expansion of NATO, Russian actions have actually resulted in the expansion of NATO.
It's a mess for Russia and it's a mess for the Western world, for NATO and the United States.
Putin is a dictator, and if he loses, that means the end of his regime, and probably of him personally. So he has to keep going.
Year 2. No end in sight. Streaming now.
Telling stories is in our nature, but the way we say them has changed. Storytelling is an art going on since inception.
If you engage with people, if you tell stories well, if you make history interesting, if you make your novels thrilling, if you write beautifully, you will get an audience.
Some writers find inspiration in tragedy.
I'm looking at grim things about Sri Lanka, but also with the absurdity, you can see the funny side and at least use some black humor to.
While others believe in drama.
I believe in plot, and I believe in suspense, and I believe in, making the reader, giving the reader a reason to turn the page.
Then there are those wordsmiths who leave it to the Almighty.
I believe it's the blessings of Lord Shiva. I think that's why I received this success.
This is the story of storytelling.